Welcome. We bid you welcome, John Clauser, Johnny Metal, the Metal Dead, coming to you from my music corner. And in the opposite corner, we have Mr. John the Music Nut. And we are going to, when we do these kind of talks, we're going to call this the 5 count after good old King Kong Monday. So, what this is going to be, we're going to talk about a little show that came on Vice TV for those of you who follow it. And the first came out in April of 2019. We're going to talk about Dark Side of the Ring. So, when we have these little wrestling chats, we're going to call these the 5 count. 5 count. To get my hand out. Five. But how you doing, John the Music? And I didn't even get to ask you that on this.
Yes, because you're so excited about talking Dark Side of Ring. I am doing fantastic. How about you?
I tell you, man, it's been a good, it's been good catching up on some Dark Side of the Ring.
Yes.
For those of you who have been following the current season, it's in season 4. As we're recording this, yes, the 4. Not the 5, 4. Right. They just released the Abdullah the Butcher episode. By the time this comes out on Wednesday, I believe it's Bam Bam Bigelow.
Oh, cool! I didn't know.
I believe that's the next episode coming up. So,
Bam Bam.
So we'll get to hear about Bam Bam and see how many times they can show Spike Dudley getting thrown into the ECW crowd.
Right.
But today, John and I are going to talk about maybe our 5. I don't like to say highlights because Dark Side of the Ring there's a good reason why it's called Dark Side of the Ring. These aren't always really happy-go-lucky kind of stories. No, there's a dark side to the wrestling business. If you hadn't figured that out, for those of you who follow it really closely, just listen to any of the old-time promotion wrestlers, and they could probably tell you some stories that hadn't made it on these shows yet. Where they're talking about getting stabbed or getting their cars beat up or slashed tires, or how some of these don't, or that 4 Horsemen episode where they couldn't get out of the cage because the crowd was rioting so bad. So these guys could tell all kinds of crazy stories. So this season only had 6 episodes. 6, I don't know. 6. Anyway, 6. And so, however, we have already determined that there's one episode we are not going to talk about, and that is the Montreal Screwjob. It's been talked about to death. We figure, I'm still kind of surprised they did an episode on it, but whatever. It made for a good story. It was actually kind of fun to watch some of it back again, but right. It's been talked about so many times. I think there's other stories here that really haven't been talked enough about. So, John the Music Nut, I'm going to let you kick it off with your first of 5 moments or standout parts, or however we want to call this.
All right. Well, the Fabulous Moolah episode, I thought Princess Victoria was great on this. One of the things she said, Moolah was a legendary wrestler. She just did not know when to stop. Perfect. There's a story about Victoria in here. Victoria was trained by Moolah. And Victoria broke her back in a match, and Moolah pretty much sold her out. Took her away, basically threw her out of the house where they were all living in, because Moolah provided a home for a lot of the wrestlers that she was training, as well as taking a piece of the money after they started wrestling. But I thought that Princess Victoria was great in here. How some of the things that she talked about, she tried to pimp her out. That's still hard to watch for me. And same thing with when they had Sweet Georgia Brown's son and daughter on talking about that as well. So I thought, I would definitely say that Princess Victoria was very good, and both her and Mula's daughter, they both love to yell at their animals. So anyway, Mula, shut up! So Mula screwed me over.
Yeah. 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 That was, I mean, that whole episode, I mean, here again, I mean, I think because I'm going to talk, I'll go ahead and mention mine because I was going to talk about, I'll mention the Mula episode too. For me with the just the hatred that came out of Wendy Richter, you can
Yes.
definitely see that there is no love lost there. Now that she's passed away, I don't know, maybe over time she has been able to forgive a little bit, but it certainly seems very evident that when you watch that episode that the pain and the anger is still very much evident there.
Absolutely.
And it really is a shame that we talked about the Montreal screw job. How about when she lost the belt to that mask, the masked lady, the spider lady. Thank you. I couldn't remember her, forgot the name already. And then she suddenly realizes it's Moolah. Why would you throw an industry, what could be a thriving new thing of professional wrestling, throw it back to the dark ages by giving the belt back to Moolah?
Correct.
Maybe Wendy was being, as she puts it, maybe she was getting a little too big for her britches. She wanted to be paid just as much, but I think she was as much an innovator in the ring for the women at the time, where I think she really could have spearheaded a great generation of women's wrestling.
No doubt.
And instead, it goes down the toilet because who else did you have out there really? You had Sensational Sherry, you had Medusa, but anybody else like that? You had some of the Japanese women,
Jumping Bomb Angels.
Jumping Bomb Angels. That was a fantastic team, but they would wind up staying in Japan. They did. You just didn't have that plethora of women's wrestlers like you do now. So I think that was a screw job in and of itself, because Absolutely. I think it just threw the industry back a little bit. So
yeah, she held back Leilani Kai, she held back Judy Martin. I mean, these women can go. They were all great workers.
Absolutely, they were.
Leilani Kai was fantastic. Leilani Kai should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yes,
they made her a transitional champion. How do you have someone there who was the WWE Women's Champion, not even in the Hall of Fame, who had a great career in the WWE as a wrestler, a single and a tag team wrestler, had a great career in Japan, had a great career as a trainer. She trained a lot of wrestlers. I mean, I think she's a living legend, in my opinion, and you don't hear a peep about her. She's great.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Judy Martin was great too, but Leilani had the belts and all that. Wow.
Yeah. It's a shame. It really is a shame. Say what you want about Moolah. I think a lot of people would come to love her with all the goofy stuff she would do with Mae Young later on in before she passed away. Some of that Mae Young, those stuff, I'm like, oh. But that's another episode for another time. Okay, well, there we go. There's our number 5. So go ahead with your next one, and let's see where we bounce from there.
Okay, the Gino Hernandez episode, when Gino's mother finally finds out it was not a murder, because there was rumors for years that it was a murder, but they originally said it was because of a drug overdose. And at the end, there's a voice where we don't see who it is saying that it actually wasn't a murder, but it still makes you wonder if it still makes you question it. And this was this was a talent who could have went to WWF. We'll say the old names now for historic purposes, the WWF or the NWA, and could have been a star in either one of them.
Absolutely.
And his hard living caught up to him. But he was a star in the making.
Yeah.
Gino Hernandez, fantastic talent. He had the charisma. He would have been a perfect horseman.
Oh,
He would have
absolutely.
been perfect in the horseman. He was a great worker. He could talk.
Hmm.
He dressed the parts. He knew how to get heats. But the hard living caught up to him, and he died at like age 27.
Yeah, 27,
And
28, something like that. It was really young.
yeah, and they had his mom was on there, and his mom, I thought she came off very good in this episode. She did a great job, but it always makes you wonder, what could have been.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and that was actually another one of mine too. Is so just knowing that for years his mom kept having to look over her shoulder
yes,
because of what she thought she knew and what she thought and stuff like that, and she wasn't really sure if maybe there was still something over her own head, and so to finally get that peace after 30 some years, um and be to know that there's nothing there's no reason to be afraid. You're
right.
not your life is okay, you're safe. you know that was a beautiful end to that whole piece. But
It was.
my goodness, for those of you who didn't see that episode, or if you guys just want to check out some stuff on YouTube, and you might even, if you even have the WWE network, I believe they have world class stuff on there, and just go search some of that Gino Hernandez stuff out, and then imagine what could have been. You imagine him and Ric Flair together?
Yeah,
Yikes! I mean, not just in the wrestling ring, but I'm thinking, Ric Flair certainly lived the lifestyle. Maybe not as hard quite as Gino did, because Gino was more into the hard drugs,
right,
where Rick, I think, was just more into drinking. But
right.
could you just imagine those two and what kind of craziness could come out of any of that? I mean, just imagine I mean, and even this, imagine one of the other being heel and face, and then you have these promo battles going off. Ooh, that could there was potential that we will never get to know. But yeah, I never got to see Gino Hernandez and wrestle like on TV, because unfortunately that was the part of with the both of us growing up in Northeast Pennsylvania.
Right.
Yeah, you don't get, the only thing you get up there was WWF and then
Yeah.
WWF. You didn't get the NWA stuff until TBS came along.
Right.
You certainly didn't get AWA, because that didn't come over from the Midwest.
That came
So
on ESPN, but it came later.
came much later, pretty much at the end of the AWA's run.
Right.
So you missed out on those legendary years of Nick Bockwinkel being champion,
Mhm.
Vern Gagne being, the two of those always going at it. You
Right.
missed those early days of Hulkamania, the East West connection, Adrian Adonis and Jesse Ventura.
And the
There
high
was a
flyers.
And the
Yeah.
high flyers, Jim Brunzell and Greg Gagne and all those guys. There was a lot. They produced a lot of great talent, but the only time you ever knew about it in the 70s or early 80s, if you lived in Pennsylvania, is if you picked up the Wrestler or Inside Wrestling magazines or
That's
Pro
what I was just
Wrestling
gonna say.
Illustrated. And that's
That's
it.
how I learned.
That's how I learned about all those guys, so I don't know. But yeah, so we're both on the same wavelength here with our favorite highlights and spotlights. So this is good. This is good. But it's
Right.
so yeah, so hit me with number three.
Okay. The stabbing of Bruiser Brody. Tony Atlas was spectacular here. This line that Tony Atlas said still brings me it's bringing me a chill just saying it. He took Bruiser Brody to the hospital, and Tony's getting on them. Come on, work on them. They're not. He's just like laying there. They go, "Well, you gotta understand here. Here, a stabbing is like a cold is in the United States. This happened in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
So, so he was stabbed, and he's just like laying there dying. And in the meantime, he should have been getting medical treatment immediately. Whatever they could have done, and then they got into his liver. That you hear that, you just cringe. Um, very sad story. If you knew about Bruiser Brody, the man behind the wrestler, he was just a good family man.
Yeah.
And for this to happen to him, and the perpetrator, did he even do time at all? It's a sad story. This happened, and Bruiser Brody was a talent. He was one of these. He was like an Abdullah the Butcher, an Andre the Giant. He just worked from. He never signed a long-term deal with anybody. He was just a bat. It was a legitimate badass.
Oh
But
gosh, yeah.
yeah, or Stan Hansen, and all those guys. They were big over in Japan. I mean, I believe Bruiser Brody worked in Japan too.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, so that's that's kind of hard to watch, but it's something. But if you want to talk about it, Dark Side, this sums
That
it
was
really up.
it.
The episode was very well done, but it's a hard watch. And gosh, I wish Bruiser Brody was a hell of a worker for a guy that size too. And just like you, John, did you ever see him wrestle live? Or I only knew about him from magazines.
No, I don't think. Again, if he came into the WWF, it was long before I started watching. If he ever did I think he may have wrestled Bruno at some point, but I don't think it was ever something that was on television. But no, I never got to see him.
Okay.
But
Yeah. So there's my number 3.
So for me with that episode, so I'll go into my highlights from that one. For me, it's just listening to Tony Atlas saying, "Look, I need to get this. We've been here for 2 days. I have to talk about Bruiser Brody. Let me talk about it. Let me get this story." And then he starts telling this story of that night. And I just couldn't listen to it. It was just chilling listening to him just recall these details very vividly. When he goes as, I was in the locker room and I heard a, he makes this awful noise, and you just like all of a sudden you're just transported into that locker room, and you're almost hearing this noise coming from the shower area. I mean, just Tony Atlas telling that whole story was just chilling. It was probably easily my favorite episode of that season. Just because, again, it was just so well done, and it was just you were just so drawn in. Dutch Mantel tells what he knew of what happened. It would have been nice to have heard what Carlos Colon would have, aside from other little snippets of interviews. It's just, hearing Tony describe, as Bruiser was getting into the hospital, and he was like, trying to, under his breath, just like, "You better not drop me." It's like, "Bruiser, I've benched more than you weigh, so you're good."
I curl more. Exactly.
Curl more. Exactly.
Yeah.
I curl more than you weigh. You're good. So it's like, and it just the whole. I was like, what? Well, how did it? Dutch Mantel said, "Oh yeah, I got the subpoena to be there 10 days after they announced the verdict. It got hung up in the mail, or it got lost in the mail. I never got asked to, just like Tony Atlas, if he got asked to be there, it either got lost in the mail, or they didn't want to. They were, again, sweeping it under the rug.
Yep.
It's kind of like, it's like you said, a stabbing in Puerto Rico is like, in a hospital, is like a cold in America. Well, at night at the wrestling matches in Puerto Rico, well, that's pretty much anything like what you hear in New York City or Chicago or the mean streets of LA. It's another shooting. Well, that's what else is new. And that's a shame. That's sad. That is so sad. Yes, it's a volatile crowd. It's a violent crowd that obviously thought everything was completely real. And if that's how they really treated it, well, I don't know. But that whole story, that whole episode really was just, they just sucked you in and they just drew you in with that story. And they did a fine job.
Absolutely. Definitely.
All right. Well, let's, so if you haven't figured it out, folks, we're bouncing our favorite things from each episode. So this is working out perfectly. So go ahead with number 2 and let's see which one you go with.
Well, the love story that was Randy and Liz. I mean,
Ooh, yeah.
spectacular story. A sad one to watch now because Lanny's gone.
Yeah.
Scott's gone. But
Yeah.
and they were so good. It's Lanny Poffo. I mean, God, I loved listening to his interviews after he was done wrestling. I mean, what a intelligent, smart, nice man. I mean, and saying, you know, my just the nice things he says about his brother Randy here. He goes, well, Randy was the guy that was, you know, he was the alpha male, but he was getting over, so I was happy to hold the ring ropes for him. I mean, that's awesome. That's love, man. That's love. But I thought he was superb. Jake the Snake is fantastic in this. That story about Damien about to gnaw on Randy Savage's arm and the what happened before the conversation they had. Why don't you have the snake bite you first? And he's there, not the snake is biting, gnawing on my leg for 20 minutes. And he goes, don't take no serums, don't take no pills, you don't, you know, you
don't take no serums and no player, no, you don't take none of that. You gotta go in there and you take it like a man. Yeah, we gotta make this real.
Just to prove that he was that Damon was devenomized. So actually, Snake goes, well, yeah. Then I was pissed, and then I start slapping the snake around before I put on Randy's shoulder, and then they go, and then I remember you watched that as it happened on Saturday Night Main Event, right?
Yes,
that was
fantastic. I did.
I remember watching that, and you're like, holy shit, he's really not into him, and Randy's in legit pain.
Yes. Yes.
I remember that, and Snake is going, yeah, well, it was a lot longer than what you guys saw on television. And then then they continued to feud. And when he slapped Elizabeth, that was a Tuesday in Texas, I remember.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And then they went to visit Elizabeth's family, and her grandfather stopped Randy at the pass. He goes, you took an oath that no harm would ever be done to our daughter. You can't step into this house. You're like, whoa.
Yep.
So Randy had to beat the shit out of it.
Yep.
Get the feud over.
Yep.
So he can get back in the house. That's the real people think.
Yeah. Pretty much.
That was awesome. But the whole episode is awesome. I thought that was very well done. I thought Linda Boulea was fantastic on this episode. Jimmy Hart was also very good on this. I mean, this season is one of riches. I mean, the people who they got on to talk, Bruce Prichard was great on this.
Oh, Bruce Prichard was wonderful.
Bruce Prichard.
First of all, tell us who you are. No, I'm not going to do that.
And we could talk about him at another time. Bruce Prichard back in the day.
Oh yes. No, that's actually Paul Bear's voice.
There you go, Paul Bear. That's right. But excellent episode. I thought it was very well done. That's one you can watch over and over. There you go.
Yeah.
But I love that story with the snake, with Damien.
Well, you know, for me with the whole Savage and that whole thing, I mean, I would have loved to have seen a little bit more of the ICW stuff and why it was so outlaw. You know, I'll have to look through some of that stuff, but I mean, but it was really more about Randy and Elizabeth, so I'll give that a pass. But yeah, I mean, you kind of always knew that Randy was really intense. You just didn't know just how intense he really was behind the curtain. How did he describe it? His dial went to 10 and most of the time it was broke.
Yeah, yes, that was
You know,
another great
so
Lanny line there.
yeah, Laney had some wonderful lines in this thing. And I remember watching it on television when Rainey was being courted by all the managers.
Yeah, I watched that too.
And it's like Freddie Blassie, you've dazzled the diamonds in front of my face, and Johnny Valiant with your whatever Johnny Valiant did, and Mr. Fuji with your deviousness, and Jimmy Hart with your whatever, all these guys, and they all had
Bobby the Brain.
Bobby the Brain had his
The
own
best there ever
thing,
was.
and and he goes through all of this, but I'm gonna bring out the one that I've picked, and she's coming through that door, and then here comes Elizabeth, and I'm just like, you remember, let's see, what would be a good description, where like think of in the movie The Mask, and Jim Carrey's mask face opens up and the tongue just goes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a good way to describe it.
that's about how I saw when I saw Elizabeth. I was like, whoa, my goodness. Yow. Okay. Yeah. Everybody loved Elizabeth, hated Randy. Hated Randy. Everybody didn't want to have nothing to do with Randy Rhodes, Randy Savage. But boy, everybody loved to look at Elizabeth. Ooh. But for me, gosh, what was it? I think for me, an interesting part of that episode. Well, I'll give you the couple of interesting episodes parts. When Randy was asked by a news reporter in regards to Elizabeth's passing, and
yes.
I was really shocked at just how nonchalantly he wasn't emotional about it.
No.
Which I was really surprised at. Maybe by that point he'd gotten it all out of him and he knew how to conduct himself. But that just seemed really strange. I would have liked to have known what happened, if they really did mend their fences and made their peace and went on about their lives. I can't imagine, not being torn up about something like that. That's just me. I don't know. But then again, I'm not Randy Savage. So he was 58 when he died. He looked like he was already in his late 60s. The way his hair and everything just went completely white.
Yes.
He looked a lot older. And I thought, ooh, I'm just 4.5 years away from 58. Yikes. But but he just looked so much older than he did. But I think Lex Luger telling the story from Eric Bischoff's podcast, boy, that's hard to listen to, but Lex, we've all seen what's happened with Lex. He physically, he's not in the best of shape. Spiritually, he's in a wonderful place. So that's, for that, in that respects, he's like, I need to just be, he's just going to be honest because he's not going to lie about it. And, this is, what has he got to lose really at this point? It's a shame we will never see Elizabeth in the Hall of Fame because I believe her family is what's going to hold that back.
Yeah, you can't blame them.
And yeah, you certainly can't blame them. It's a shame Randy didn't get in while he was alive.
Yeah.
And it was a shame that that Laney couldn't have gotten in there as the whole Poffo family, but it is what it is. I'm sure Laney will get his recognition in some way, shape, or form. But he was definitely gold in this episode, especially when he said about Randy being a bedwetter.
Yeah. And kept a straight face the whole time.
And kept a straight face the entire time, which is great. So that was a very powerful episode. One you can definitely, again, the images of Elizabeth, I love you.
Yeah.
Will you marry me? Oh yeah. And of course, you see all the happy, smiling faces, and the girl with the glasses, and the that whatever that hat was, and she's like, yay! She's all getting all teary, and then you see the redhead with the glasses, and you could tell she's crying a river, and it's like, this is what they did a wonderful story doing all that. I thought they did a great job with all of that. But again, I remember all that. It was as it was coming on television. I remember the wedding on SummerSlam, and so it was all fun. It was good, but it was a good episode. It was pretty powerful. So yeah, rest in peace, Randy, and all these guys, all these people who passed away. But I have a feeling the last ones we're going to talk about is a big family of folks.
Yeah. And before we do,
Yes.
one more thing I'd like to add about the Randy one.
Oh, yes.
When he and Elizabeth had broken up, yet Randy pushed WCW to hire her, so just to keep, just make sure that she was taken care of.
Yeah, that was so admirable of him. Yes, absolutely.
I'm like, oh, what a man. That says a lot, because if you're going through all that, you're going through a divorce, and you're still looking out for her, wanting to make sure that she is going to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
That says a lot about him as a person.
Yeah. And she still looked pretty darn good.
Absolutely. And I was saying to John off air, I thought she looked better in I liked NWO Elizabeth more. I mean, I just thought she was sexier then. I mean, I liked leather clad Elizabeth more than demure Elizabeth.
I found it interesting she actually had a couple wrestling matches, and that her first one was with one that we just lost recently, Daphne.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I had forgotten I was reading the Wikipedia page and I read about that. I'm like, oh wow, I either missed it or I totally forgot about that. But
I thought it was in her contract. She wasn't allowed to wrestle.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there was something that she wanted to do just to, but I don't know. But yeah, I found that was rather interesting. So I speaking of Daphne, I wonder if there'll ever be a Dark Side of the Ring episode regarding her career.
It's definitely something that they could definitely dive into her,
because there was, I mean, gosh, they, with all the mental health stuff that she had and that she dealt with. Oh boy,
yeah,
that might be a very tough episode to watch. But
it'd be a tough episode to watch, but it would put a focus on mental illness as well. So it'd be something that could be educational as well as really hard to watch. I mean, I guess it depends on who you are.
Yeah. So, boy. All right. Now for the last one. Go for it.
Kevin, what a man. That guy has gone through so much hell, and to come out of it the way he is, a very calm family man, which he always was. He didn't get the big push like Harry did. He was let's give props to everyone involved here. Jim Cornette was amazing.
Yes.
His last name is Manning.
Chris Manning, I think is Chris. I think
it's let me just write it down. I was going to say Danny Manning, but he was that's not it. David Manning.
David Manning. Thank you. You're right. David Manning
was fantastic in this episode. He was great in a Gino episode. They got to get more David Manning on these. Anything that has to do with world class championship wrestling, anything that has to do with Texas, they do something on the Freebirds down the road. Call up David Manning. He was sensational here. This episode, you know what's so great about this, John?
What was that?
The narrator, Dutch Mantell, barely said a thing. He didn't have to.
You're right. Now that you mention it,
all of the everyone else who was involved with Kevin and Jim and David, they told the story perfectly. This was hard. I mean, I knew all this happened. I remember
me too.
Yeah, and it was still hard to watch, but to see where Kevin, what place he is in now, he had to leave Texas. I don't blame him for leaving Texas. You go through that much. You
Yeah.
bury 5 brothers and your father. Wow. And the thing about, they really told you how it really was in Texas back in the early to mid 80s. The Von Erichs were over like Rover. They
Hmm.
were they were near, I don't want to say that word, but they were like Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania in the 80s. That was them, but probably a higher level because
Oh
they were
yeah.
part of the community. They're doing commercials for local businesses. They're just, it was like, there are guys, and they made it. They
Hmm.
were getting courted by the WWE in '84. I don't know if you remember this, John. They were courting them. They were putting them in WWF magazine because they were trying to get them over, and they never went.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, they were trying.
That's
They were
true.
they were pushing. They were talking about them because they were trying to sign them, and they wouldn't leave Fritz.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oh my gosh, but that episode is spectacular. Just
Yeah.
seeing what where David is today, and it
Kevin.
showed a lot of great. Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin. Thank you. Got it. David was going to be the guy because he was the best worker. I mean, I like watching some of the footage later on in life. Yeah, David could work. David could have been the champ and held it proudly. You could have saw him and Flair flipping that title back and forth. That's how good David was.
Easily. Easily.
Oh my gosh. And Kerry had to look. Kerry, Kerry had to look all the way till he died. I mean,
Yeah.
because he was in WWE feuding with Kurt Hennig
Yep.
just a few years before he passed on.
Yeah.
And I heard about the thing with Kerry's losing his foot, which back then they were able to hide that.
Is amazing in and of itself. I remember hearing some story about that even back in the day, but
Right,
I didn't hear about his foot being gone. I heard like a bone or two, but I didn't
right.
hear about the whole foot being gone. But wow, that's pretty amazing that he could hide that as
He
long
was
as he
able to
did.
hide that, and they didn't. I don't think it came out until after he died. But yeah, it's a sad story, but it's a story of family. It's a story of tragedy. It's a story of triumph for Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a hard one to even speak about because, but what a man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, to be able to endure all of that pain and suffering within his family, and to be able to come out of that, and knowing that he had his own suicidal thoughts,
Yes,
and said, no, I can't do that. I cannot do that. I cannot leave my family. I need to, you know, I mean, plus, good Lord, you'd think he was in the Garden of Eden with where he lives out there in Hawaii. I mean,
oh
my
my gosh,
gosh,
yeah,
that's gorgeous. I would love to,
it
I would
is.
love to spend some time out there. But I mean, my gosh, I've forgotten about the young child brother that died, from
Chris.
just a
Oh,
freak accident,
the
you know,
electrocution.
the electrocution one, you
Oh yeah,
know.
that was Jack.
Yeah. So I really didn't know. I had forgotten about that. What
Okay.
rewatching that episode again, I forgot that was involved. And then of course, what happens to David, with what happened with him, and then Mike, and then Carrie, and then Chris. You know, his Fritz and his mom, they and his wife, they split up because the mom just can't do it. She can't take it anymore. This is just too much,
Right.
so they split up, and you know uh even seeing the absolute ridiculous mistake of bringing Lance.
Yes.
These fans knew better. They
Yeah.
knew that he was not one of us. They you're not gonna throw that over there. You're not gonna put the wool over their eyes with that one. No, you could tell he couldn't do it, and I don't know whatever became of the guy. But one of the things that I thought was great was he was Ric Flair and Kerry having that match at the Texas Stadium, and you got 43,000 people or however whatever
Yeah.
it was, and it's like,
Yes.
you're not going to let Flair walk out with the belt.
Nope.
Not unless you want to have 43,000 people coming after Ric Flair. You
Right.
knew that Rick was going to have to drop the belt that night. And I think, and I think he gained it back from him probably like maybe a week or a month later or something like that.
It was 18 days later and it was in Japan. I
Okay,
remember
right.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but if you're gonna do that in Texas with 43,000 people, you're gonna make sure that every one of those people goes home happy. And
Right.
so they did. So but those it's like, I could still hear Kevin say, I don't like early morning phone calls.
Yes.
And because every time it just seemed like it was an early morning phone call when something would happen, and it's like, yeah, I can't imagine what Kevin had to have endured all those years, in such a, and we're not talking, aside from Jack, we're not talking like a spread out long period of time. This all happens, he loses his brothers like in what,
Every
like almost an 8-year, 10-year span.
Yeah.
I mean, boom, 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 boom. It just, that was a terrible choice of words given what happened with a couple of them, but you know what I mean.
Yes, yes.
I I I don't think I could have handled it as well. I know my own mentality and how I am mentally. Sometimes if that had happened to me, I would be. There's probably a good chance I wouldn't be doing a video like this with you guys. But yeah, that was hard. That whole episode is just, again, it's just such a, because Kevin's able to talk about it in a place of peace.
Yes.
And that's how he was able to he still looks pretty good. He didn't let himself go or anything. Yeah, he's what, 60 something years old, but
Like 66. Okay,
something
he's
like
gray,
that.
but he's 66. I mean, he's still in shape. I mean, I'm not
Still
saying
in good
wrestling
shape.
shape,
No,
but no, and his son's never really caught on to a major federation. That's something I know, if they're still
no.
active.
I think
I'd like to see
MLW
that.
was the last time I saw them doing anything, and I don't know if they have since. So,
Okay.
and maybe they just do. Maybe back in Hawaii, they'd still do some more. Hey, all those who watch this and they know about those kids, let me know in those comments. Fill us in a little bit here. But
Oh, and just one thing I'd like to say, Dave Meltzer, I thought was very good on this, but he was incorrect on one thing. Um, he said that Kerry couldn't use the claw anymore in WWE. That's not true. He did use the claw, but it would be a setup before you do the discus punch. It just
right,
wasn't the finisher anymore. And
right,
they did
yeah,
refer to him, they called him Texas Tornado. When they call him Texas Tornado, they say the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich. I
yeah,
remember Vince saying that vividly all the time.
yeah, yeah.
So
So
otherwise, I thought he was very good on it, though.
yeah, I think he did. He usually does a pretty good job doing that
He,
stuff. I know him, and I know him and Cornette don't get along, but
yeah, I mean they're both historians, but the fact that Jim did it and
yeah,
he was involved with so much in the business, and Dave has just been a writer and has made a tremendous career as a writer too. You
right.
know, which is something Al Snow talks about on, if you want to go watch on YouTube, how some of his interviews that are coming up on Wrestling Shoot interviews, he's talking a lot about. He says high things about Dave Meltzer, but he also said, yeah, but he wasn't putting up the ring like I was. He wasn't paying his dues like I was.
No,
But what he's done well. So
right.
respect for that.
All right. So I want to throw this out to you. So you mentioned a dark side of the ring with the Freebirds,
Yes.
if they could do it. There's one kink in that being able to really truly happen. P.S. Hayes still works for WWE.
That's correct. That's correct. And he's the only one that's still with us.
And
Well,
he's the only one that's still with us.
the original three. I know Jimmy Garvin's still with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's true. And that was another thing. I mean, you saw a lot of WWE footage on this.
yeah. Oh
And
yeah. They're able to sprinkle it a little bit, which how they get the
right.
rights, I don't know, but you'll never get any WWE employees,
Yeah,
actual, because I don't, even when Bruce Pritchard was on this, I don't think he was actually employed by
you're
WWE at the
correct. He
time.
wasn't. You're correct.
So that's why he was able to do that episode, or those episodes. But then, but you'll never see any of the current talent or anything like that, or get back to where they can do this kind of stuff, which unless WWE does their own version of Dark Side of the
It's going to
Ring or
be
something
their
like that.
version. It's not. It's
Yeah,
going to be their version.
it's not going to be good. It's not going to be as good.
No.
Even I think of an episode that we'll be talking about when we talk about season 2. There was a little thing that happened up in Boston, Massachusetts, for this little rogue promotion called ECW. And when you watch the WWE talk about this particular incident, yeah, they don't talk much about it.
Right.
You gotta leave it to the hands of the man behind it. And you knew he was never gonna be in a WWE ring. But that's for next week. So we don't
Right.
want to jump ahead of ourselves here.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, for those of you who followed the season, again, if you're disappointed we didn't talk about the Montreal screw job, again, I don't think we certainly weren't going to light the world on fire with any thoughts that we had on the episode. I think the episode was well done.
Yes.
Was it necessary? Maybe not, but at least it was another way of looking at it from a fresh set of eyes again, and so forth. But again, it is what it is. There's been volumes spoken and written about it, so we thought, well, we'll just give that a pass. So
yeah, and just for the record, I'd like to say Bret Hart is one of my favorite wrestlers ever, and
yep.
He can tell a story in a ring like nobody's business. But like John and I were saying before we even went on air, do we really want to go over that again? It's been done to death already.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So but that's not going to stop you guys from talking about it in the comments. So
absolutely,
feel free, like, share, subscribe with all your wrestling friends. Wow. Friends and family members and so forth. What did you guys think of Dark Side of the Ring? And if you've watched these episodes, to me, it's just wonderful storytelling. The narrators for that season was mostly Dutch Mantel.
A little bit of Mick Foley too.
Mick Foley was the main one for the Bruiser Brody episode, but other than that, it was mostly Dutch Mantel. But then it's Chris Jericho pretty much from here out. So there's probably a lot we can say about Chris Jericho as well. So
yeah.
So John, what have we got coming up that we can be plugging and watching for and stuff of that nature on your end?
Okay. Well, we're talking music, which we love as much as wrestling, if not more.
Yep.
Let's see. John and I just did an episode with Peter Kerr. It's not out yet, but I'm thinking it'll be out probably a few days after this episode. And this episode was, oh, you might have to edit here, John, because I totally forgot.
This was bands that should have been bigger but weren't.
Thank you. Yes. I've been doing so many of these, I can't remember them all now. But we all went for different angles on this one. We all went not just rock. I mean, it was all rock, but different types of rock, of course. But yeah, that episode turned out very well. I mean, anything that you see on Rock Daydream Nation when our friend Peter Kerr is gold. So like and subscribe to his channel if you already haven't. But John and I were part of that episode. It was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
We were introducing each other to a lot of great music. I mean, which is what's great about doing this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But a couple hours from when we're filming this now, my show with Grant Arthur on Grant's Rock Warehouse about the band Delight will be premiering.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was this was the band who were more hip hop meets funk. It was their biggest hit was Groove Is in the Heart, which was from 1990's album World Click. So that one was a fun one to do, and Grant's been really busy between his own channel and the Kajarians, with hosting and editing, but that show will be debuting. Well, it will be this past Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. So that one should be coming out. Well, will be coming out. And then I'm doing a show on Grant's Rock Warehouse as part of a panel, the One and Done series. We're going to talk about the only album by Hughes Thrall, which was Glenn Hughes and Pat Thrall. Pat Thrall was best known for playing in the Pat Travers Band, and Glenn Hughes, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Black
Country Communion. Yep.
Solo. Still
Trapeze.
could sing Trapeze. Thank you. I forgot about that. Oh gosh, heck of a bass player, but what a singer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll be talking about that. That one we're going to be doing it Friday, and I don't believe that's going to be live. That I don't know if that's going to be a live stream or not. So that's what I got going on this week. How about you, John?
Yeah, I mean, my other thing, other than the show from Rock Daydream Nation, on the Contrarians channel, we did an episode on favorite EPs.
Yes,
which was a lot of fun. I kind of breezed through my choices kind of quick, but it was a wonderful time just to be back on the Contrarians, because I haven't been on that channel in a long time. And and I always say I have to thank the Contrarians for getting me to introduce myself to all these great guys that you've seen me on, and my co-captain here as well. And I just remembered I just realized that your first video for the Contrarians was the Hold Your Fire album from Rush. So there you go.
That's right. Yep.
So and I was on that one as well. So that's where we go back. But really, other than that, I don't have a whole lot else coming up. We've got we're going to be defending Raven's Pack is Back on Rock Daydream Nation. Next, we're going to record that, I believe, next Friday, or this coming Friday. We're going to talk about on Grant's Rock Warehouse. We're going to be doing a talk on Ted Nugent's Intensities in 10 Cities album.
Yeah, which, that's both of us will be on that. Yeah, I forgot
which both of us will be on that one. I'm sure that'll get some heat somewhere. But the cool thing about, and we talk a lot about music mostly on this channel, but we do talk about wrestling. But the fun thing about this that we've discovered is whether we're talking about music, whether we're talking about wrestling or whatever it is, we just have discovered we can share stories and thoughts of things that we've enjoyed and maybe watched or something, and it's just the conversations can go all kinds of different directions, and those are what always makes it more fun. Sometimes the stuff we talk about off air is almost as interesting as what we actually put on the air, so that makes it even more fun, because we're just building that rapport, and we're hoping we're building that rapport with you all, the viewers, and anybody who watches the live chat, and anything, and anybody who shares these things. I love being able to interact with people in the comments. To me, that's a lot of fun. It's just another avenue for us to visit, getting away from the music corner a little bit, but that's okay. Wrestling is a big thing of me too. So got to do that. So for the 5 count, as the wrestling shows are 5, Monday 5. In the opposite corner, John the Music Nut. From my music corner here, John Clauser, Johnny Metal, the Metal Dad. We'll see you next week when we talk about season 2 of Dark Side of the Ring. So like, share, subscribe, share some stories. We'll see you soon.
Take care.